We begin with President Trump's trade war quickly escalating as Wall Street holds out hope for a U.S. compromise with both Canada and Mexico. Stocks closing for the day, gaining back some ground, though, from this week's losses earlier. The Dow rebounding about 500 points. Of course, this is after the White House announced a one-month exemption from tariffs on Mexico and Canada for the big three automakers. Also today, the president says that he spoke about the tariffs on the phone with Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and pushed him to do more to curb the flow of fentanyl into the United States. ABC News' Elizabeth Schulze and ABC News senior White House correspondent Selena Wang, both in our D.C. bureau, joining us now. So, Elizabeth, this is a different conversation, certainly, than we've been having for the rest of the week here. We know that we're seeing these stocks really rallying today. And as you're analyzing this, what are investors looking at here? Are they looking at the trade war specifically, how that's being driven, or do you think this has a lot to do with that exemption for the automakers?
A little bit of both, Kana. And when you look at that chart, by the way, nice to talk about a little bit of green on that Dow board versus the red that we've been talking about the past 2 days. And it does tell the story of exactly how closely traders in the stock market are following each and every development on this trade war right now, including that exemption that was issued midday today by the White House. And you can see that midday is when we had that turnaround in stocks. They were a little bit lower and flat ahead of that, really just waiting for any news on what the White House is going to do. And the big question for traders has been, how long are these tariffs going to stay in place? And so what this move signaled, the exemption for the automakers, is that President Trump is open to granting some reprieve, especially for some of those major companies whose stocks have been hit really hard over the past couple of days, Kana. That's an optimistic signal for some of the traders who say, okay, maybe this won't be the long-term pain that we expect from tariffs being in place over a while. All that said, it doesn't mean that the rest of the tariffs at this point aren't moving forward. So there is still a lot of uncertainty in the stock market and a lot of uncertainties for American businesses as they're trying to plan about what does this look like for them if we do move forward with those tariffs. And keep in mind that the White House has reiterated that it still does plan to move forward with reciprocal tariffs on April 2nd. And that would be a pretty dramatic change in cost for a lot of businesses. So also why you did see a gain higher, but it's not like you're seeing, Kana, a huge surge in stocks in response to this. A little bit of relief, perhaps, but still a lot of uncertainty.
Certainly. And Selena, in terms of the White House talking about this exemption here for the big three automakers, what do we know about those? And is it possible we could actually see more exemptions in other areas?
Yeah, it is possible. The White House is signaling that they're open to these other exemptions and explaining why they're putting this 1 month pause for these car makers. The White House says it's because the president spoke to those big three automakers. They do not want these tariffs to go into effect. A lot is on the line here for these car makers. Some of the CEOs have warned that these 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico would be disastrous to their businesses. So they want the White House to put pause on all of this. And that's really because, Kana, the supply chains for car makers has become so integrated and complex under Trump's tariff policy. The costs could quickly rise by thousands of dollars because in the production process, the parts cross through the U.S., Canada, Mexico border multiple times and it gets tariffed each time. But look, this is just a 1 month reprieve. And you heard Elizabeth mention that on April 2nd, there's going to be even more tariffs, which will also hit these automakers. So it's still unclear what's coming next. But specifically, our Rachel Scott asked about these exemptions and if they could apply to eggs at a time when we're seeing those surging prices. Take a listen.
The U.S. imported $43 million worth of eggs from Canada. I know you mentioned some of the exemptions when it comes to automakers. Will there be any other carve-outs, including for eggs? We know prices are soaring for Americans.
The president is open to hearing about additional exemptions. He always has open dialogue, and he'll always do, what's right, what he believes is right for the American people. But again, as for the egg crisis in this country, the president is wholeheartedly committed to ensuring we're increasing our egg supply, and we're also bringing down costs.
Now, Kana, what I'm hearing from sources is that within the Trump administration, there are some divides in terms of how much they should escalate these tariffs. There are some who believe that they should be taking a slower approach, others who believe that they should go full force, that tariffs are more than just a negotiating tool. It's also a way for the U.S. to become rich.
And so while he's talking about, Elizabeth, the U.S. becoming rich, I mean, what's the timeline here? How long do you think the president is hoping that Americans will really hold out here? What is the timeline until he sees the results that he's promising?
And that's really a question for consumers. How much are they willing to bear higher prices, Kana, on top of the stubbornly high inflation, which is part of, in fact, maybe the biggest reason of what got President Trump into the White House in the first place. We know that those grocery price increases could happen within a matter of days here when you talk about the tariffs and you talk about fresh produce from Mexico, vegetables, fruits. We could see gas prices in the Northeast go up by 20, 30 cents in the next week. How much appetite is there for consumers to continue to bear that? And how much can consumers do that at a time when we have seen a little bit of a pullback in their overall feeling about the economy right now? That said, American consumers have powered this economy, even with high prices over the past couple of years. The White House has said it's optimistic about the overall state of growth in the economy. That's something that generally, when I talk to a lot of economists, they say we're in a good place right now still, but there are these headwinds going forward. So it's a little bit about how much can consumers deal with this uncertainty, but then also what does this look like going forward? And a lot of it, Kana, really just comes down to what kind of clarity will be issued by the White House. I mean, even if they say there are these sweeping reciprocal tariffs April 2nd, some investors I've talked to say at least that provides a deadline and people know exactly what's coming. Part of what's been the issue is that there's just no sense of what's going to happen today, what's going to happen tomorrow, and that injects a lot more difficulty planning for businesses in their decisions when it comes to hiring or getting inventory, all the decisions they have to make day to day.
All right. And also, Selena, the president is speaking today with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Sounds like really pushing him for more progress in the fight against fentanyl. But we also know, Selena, our numbers here at ABC show that less than 1% of fentanyl seized coming into the United States actually came over the border, the northern border. So what kind of progress are they really looking for there?
Yeah, and that's according to both U.S. and Canadian data, which shows that it's just not a significant amount of fentanyl that's coming through the border from Canada. So Canadian officials have been arguing for quite some time now that Trump's reasoning for hitting them with tariffs just doesn't make a lot of sense. In fact, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau calling Trump's tariffs, quote, a dumb thing to do. Now, we know that the president and Justin Trudeau spoke for nearly an hour today, but there were no breakthroughs, no reprieve looking down the pipeline for Canada. This is clearly not what Justin Trudeau wanted. His economy is very much reliant on exports to the United States. Trump writing in a Truth Social post that the call ended in a, quote, somewhat friendly matter. And at the same time, Canada is hitting the United States with 25% tariffs on more than $100 billion worth of American products. There are concerns from economists that this trade war could really spiral as you see these tit-for-tat tariffs, the reciprocal tariffs coming from the Trump administration as well. That could really cause prices for consumers to increase pretty quickly.
All right, Elizabeth and Selena, our thanks to both of you.